Welcome back to Bible Quizzes. We got another 80 questions today, so let's get started. 1. Who was the first person to die in the Bible? Adam, Abel, Seth, or Noah? Abel. Genesis 4:8 states that Cain killed his brother Abel, making him the first recorded death. 2. Who was the oldest woman mentioned in the Bible? Sarah, Naomi, Deborah, or Eve? Sarah. Genesis 23:1 states that Sarah lived to be 127 years old, the only woman's age recorded in the Bible. 3. Who built the Ark of the Covenant? Moses, Aaron, Bezalel, or Joshua? Bezalel. Exodus 37:1 states that Bezalel built the Ark of the Covenant according to God's instructions. 4. What did Jesus do before choosing his 12 disciples? Fasted, prayed all night, went to the synagogue, or read the scriptures? Prayed all night. Luke 6:12-13 states that Jesus prayed all night before choosing his disciples. 5. What weapon did David use to defeat Goliath? A sword, sling and stone, bow and arrow, or a spear? Sling and stone. 1 Samuel 17:49 states that David struck Goliath with a stone from his sling. 6. What was the name of the only female ruler of Judah? Jezebel, Athaliah, Deborah, or Huldah? Athaliah. 2 Kings 11:1-3 states that Athaliah ruled Judah for 6 years after seizing the throne. 7. Who was the only person in the Bible recorded as laughing at God? Abraham, Job, Sarah, or Goliath? Sarah. Genesis 18:12-15 states that Sarah laughed when God said she would have a child in old age. 8. What king had a bed that was over 13 feet long? Nebuchadnezzar, Og, Ahab, or Sihon? Og. Deuteronomy 3:11 states that King Og of Bashan had a bed that was 9 cubits long, about 13.5 feet. 9. Which prophet was commanded to marry a prostitute? Isaiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, or Jeremiah? Hosea. Hosea 1:2-3 states that God commanded Hosea to marry Gomer as a symbol of Israel's unfaithfulness. 10. Who walked around naked for 3 years as a prophetic sign? Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, or Micah? Isaiah. Isaiah 20:2-3 states that Isaiah walked naked for 3 years as a sign against Egypt and Cush. 11. Who had his hair cut once a year because it grew so heavy? Absalom, Samson, Solomon, or Esau? Absalom, 2 Samuel 14:26 states that Absalom's hair was cut yearly because it was too heavy. 12. Who killed a lion in a pit on a snowy day? Samson, Benaiah, David, or Joab? Benaiah, 2 Samuel 23:20 states that Benaiah killed a lion in a pit on a snowy day. 13. What was the name of the left-handed judge in the Bible? Othniel, Ehud, Gideon, or Jephthah? Ehud. Judges 3:15 states that Ehud was left-handed and used it to his advantage in battle. 14. Who fell from a window and died while Paul was preaching? Tychicus, Eutychus, Demas, or Crispus? Eutychus. Acts 29 states that Eutychus fell asleep during Paul's sermon and fell from a third-story window. 15. What prophet saw a vision of a flying scroll? Isaiah, Ezekiel, Zechariah, or Jeremiah? Zechariah. Zechariah 5:1-2 states that Zechariah saw a flying scroll symbolizing judgment. 16. What king of Israel was buried with a donkey? Jehoiakim, Saul, Ahab, or Manasseh? Jehoiakim. Jeremiah 22:19 states that Jehoiakim was buried like a donkey outside Jerusalem. 17. Who was a prophet that cooked his food over dung? Isaiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, or Zechariah? Ezekiel. Ezekiel 4:12-15 states that God told Ezekiel to cook his food over dung as a symbol of judgment. 18. Who was the first person to build a city in the Bible? Cain. Genesis 4:17 states that Cain built the first recorded city and named it after his son Enoch. 19. Which Old Testament prophet saw a vision of God's throne with wheels? Daniel, Isaiah, or Jeremiah? Ezekiel. Ezekiel 1:15-21 states that Ezekiel saw God's throne with wheels full of eyes. 20. Who was killed by being stabbed in the stomach so that his fat covered the knife? Eglon, Sisera, Haman, or Balaam? Eglon. Judges 3:21-22 states that Ehud stabbed King Eglon and the fat closed over the blade. 21. What city was Jonah supposed to go to? Nineveh, Joppa, Tarshish, or Babylon? Nineveh. Jonah 1:2 states that God commanded Jonah to preach in Nineveh. 22. What was the name of Moses' wife? Miriam, Rahab, Zipporah, or Ruth? Zipporah. Exodus 2:21 states that Moses married Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro. 23. Who was a king of Babylon that saw the writing on the wall? Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, Darius, or Cyrus? Belshazzar. Daniel 5:1-5 states that Belshazzar saw the handwriting on the wall predicting his downfall. 24. Who was the first person recorded as drunk in the Bible? Noah, Lot, Solomon, or David? Noah. Genesis 9:21 states that Noah drank wine and became drunk after the flood. 25. Who was swallowed alive by the earth because of rebellion? Korah, Balaam, Absalom, or Achan? Korah. Numbers 16:31-33 states that Korah and his followers were swallowed by the earth for rebelling against Moses. 26. Who was born covered in red hair? Esau, Jacob, Absalom, or Solomon? Esau. Genesis 25:25 states that Esau was born red and covered with hair. 27. What was the first animal that spoke in the Bible? A donkey, a snake, a lion, or a dove? Snake. Genesis 3:1-5 states that the serpent spoke to Eve in the Garden of Eden. 28. What king had his thumbs and big toes cut off? Og, Adonai-Bezek, Sihon, or Zedekiah? Adonai-Bezek. Judges 1:6-7 states that Adonai-Bezek had his thumbs and big toes cut off as punishment. 29. Who lost his strength when his hair was cut? Samson. Judges 16:17 states that Samson lost his strength when Delilah cut his hair. 30. What did King Saul try to kill David with? A sword, a spear, a bow, or a rock? Spear. 1 Samuel 18:10-11 states that Saul threw a spear at David in an attempt to kill him. 31. Who was struck dead for touching the Ark of the Covenant? Uzzah, Ahaz, Eli, or Phinehas? Uzzah. 2 Samuel 6:6-7 states that Uzzah was struck dead for touching the Ark of the Covenant. 32. Who had a vision of 4 beasts coming out of the sea? Ezekiel, Daniel, Isaiah, or Zechariah? Daniel. Daniel 7:3-7 states that Daniel saw a vision of 4 beasts symbolizing kingdoms. 33. Who was the first hunter mentioned in the Bible? Esau, Ishmael, Nimrod, or Lamech? Nimrod. Genesis 10:9 states that Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord. 34. What prophet saw a valley of dry bones come to life? Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, or Daniel? Ezekiel 37, 1-10 states that Ezekiel saw dry bones come to life as a vision of Israel's restoration. 35. What prophet was fed by ravens? Elijah, Elisha, Jeremiah, or Hosea? Elijah. 1 Kings 17, 4-6 states that ravens brought Elijah bread and meat while he hid by a brook. 36. Who killed a giant with a sling and a stone? Samuel, Saul, Joab, or David? David. 1 Samuel 17:49 states that David struck Goliath with a stone, killing him. 37. Who ordered the execution of all baby boys in Bethlehem? Herod, Caesar, Felix, or Pilate? Herod. Matthew 2:16 states that Herod ordered the killing of baby boys after Jesus' birth. 38. What insect plagued Egypt in the 8th plague? Frogs, gnats, flies, or locusts? Locusts. Exodus 10:12-15 states that locusts covered the land as the 8th plague. 39. Who dreamed about 7 fat cows and 7 thin cows? Joseph, Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar, or Daniel? Pharaoh. Genesis 41, 1-4 states that Pharaoh had a dream about 7 fat and 7 thin cows. 40. How many books are there in the Bible? 39, 27, 66, or 72? The Bible consists of 66 books, with 39 in the Old Testament and 27 in the New Testament. 41. Who was the father of Methuselah? Noah, Seth, Abel, or Enoch? Enoch. Genesis 5:21 states Enoch was the father of Methuselah. 42. Which animal did Goliath compare himself to because of David came to fight him with stones? A fox, a sheep, a dog, or a cow? A dog. 1 Samuel 17:43 narrates the scene where Goliath compares himself to a dog because David was about to fight him with stones. 43. Who was the first high priest of Israel? Moses, Levi, Aaron, or Eleazar? Aaron. Exodus 28:1 states that God appointed Aaron as Israel's first high priest. 44. Who was Jesus' first recorded miracle performed for? A blind man, a leper, a Roman centurion, or a wedding party? A wedding party. John 2, 1 through 11 states that Jesus turned water into wine at a wedding in Cana. 45. What king saw the sun move backward? Hezekiah. 2 Kings 20, 9 through 11 states that God made the sun move backward as a sign for Hezekiah. 46. What disciple walked on water with Jesus? John, Peter, James, or Thomas? Peter. Matthew 14, 28 to 29 states that Peter briefly walked on water before doubting. 47. What was the name of the man who carried Jesus' cross? Joseph, Nicodemus, Simon, or Lazarus? Simon. Luke 23:26 states that Simon of Cyrene was forced to carry Jesus' cross. 48. Who was known as the disciple whom Jesus loved? Peter, Philip, Thomas, or John? John. John 13:23 states that John was referred to as the disciple whom Jesus loved. 49. Who was the only woman mentioned as a deacon in the New Testament? Lydia, Priscilla, Phoebe, or Junia? Phoebe. Romans 16:1 states that Phoebe was a deaconess in the early church. 50. What disciple brought his brother to meet Jesus? James, Andrew, Philip, or Nathanael? Andrew. John 1:40 to 41 states that Andrew brought his brother Simon Peter to Jesus. 51. What was the name of the man who took Paul in after his conversion? Ananias, Barnabas, Silas, or Timothy? Ananias. Acts 9:17 states that Ananias was sent by God to heal Paul and baptize him. 52. Who was the first person to build an altar to God? Adam, Noah, Abraham, or Moses? Noah. Genesis 8:20 states that Noah built an altar to the Lord after the flood. 53. What was the name of the servant who lost his ear when Peter struck him? Nicodemus, Caiaphas, Annas, or Malchus? Malchus. John 18:10 states that Malchus was a servant of the high priest whose ear Peter cut off. 54. What was the name of the blind beggar Jesus healed near Jericho? Bartimaeus. Mark 10:46 to 52 states that Jesus healed blind Bartimaeus near Jericho. 55. Who was the first shepherd mentioned in the Bible? Abel, Noah, Abraham, or Jacob? Abel. Genesis 4:2 states that Abel was a keeper of sheep, making him the first recorded shepherd. 56. Who was the Roman centurion who acknowledged Jesus as the Son of God at the crucifixion? Cornelius, Julius, Longinus, or not mentioned? It's not mentioned. Matthew 27:54 states that a centurion declared, "Truly this was the Son of God, but his name is not given." 57. Who was the only woman mentioned in the Bible as bald? Miriam, Delilah, daughters of Zion, or Jezebel? The daughters of Zion. Isaiah 3:24 states that the daughters of Zion would have baldness as a punishment. 58. What was the first thing Jesus said on the cross? I thirst, I'm tired, it is finished, or Father, forgive them. Father, forgive them. Luke 23:34 states that Jesus' first words on the cross were, Father, forgive them. 59. What book in the Bible contains the most words? Psalms, Jeremiah, Genesis, or Isaiah? Jeremiah. Jeremiah contains the most words in the Bible, even though Psalms has the most chapters. 60. Who was the first king of Israel? David, Solomon, Saul, or Josiah? Saul. 1 Samuel 10:1 states that Saul was anointed as Israel's first king. 61. Who prayed and had the sun stand still? Moses, Joshua, Elijah, or Isaiah? Joshua. Joshua 10:12-14 states that Joshua prayed and the sun stood still in battle. 62. Who was the first person to be baptized in the New Testament? John, Mary, Jesus, or it's not mentioned? Jesus. The first recorded baptism is Jesus, Matthew 3:13-17, although others may have been baptized before him. 63. What was the name of Moses' mother? Zipporah, Jochebed, Miriam, or Naomi? Jochebed. Exodus 6:20 states that Jochebed was the mother of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. 64. How many chapters does the shortest book of the Bible have? 1, 2, 3, or 4? One. 2 John, 3 John, Philemon, and Jude each have only one chapter. 65. Who was the first person to worship Jesus as an infant? Simeon, the shepherds, the Magi, or Herod? The shepherds. Luke 2:15-16 states that the shepherds were the first to visit and worship Jesus. 66. What was the final plague that led Pharaoh to release the Israelites? Frogs, hail, death, or darkness? Death. Exodus 12:29-31 states that Pharaoh released the Israelites after the death of the firstborn. 67. How many baskets of leftovers were collected after Jesus fed the 5,000? 5, 7, 10, or 12? 12. Matthew 14:20 states that 12 baskets of leftovers were collected. 68. How did Judas betray Jesus? With a handshake, by pointing at him, with a kiss, or by writing a letter? With a kiss. Luke 22:47-48 states that Judas identified Jesus to the soldiers with a kiss. 69. What was the last book of the Old Testament to be written? Malachi, Daniel, Ezra, or Nehemiah? Malachi. Malachi is considered the last book written before the 400 years of silence leading to the New Testament. 70. What was the last book of the New Testament to be written? John, Acts, Revelation, or Hebrews? Revelation. Revelation, written by John around 95 to 96 AD, is the last book of the New Testament. 71. Who is traditionally credited with writing the first 5 books of the Bible? David, Moses, Solomon, or Ezra? Moses. The Torah or Pentateuch, Genesis to Deuteronomy, is traditionally attributed to Moses. 72. Which Old Testament book is made up of only one chapter? Haggai, Obadiah, Nahum, or Zephaniah? Obadiah. Obadiah has only one chapter and is the shortest book in the Old Testament. 73. How many Gospels are in the New Testament? 1, 2, 3, or 4? The 4 Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and tell the story of Jesus' life. 74. Who wrote the most words in the New Testament? Paul, Luke, John, or Peter? Luke. Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke and Acts, which contains the most words in the New Testament. 75. Which book is considered the final prophecy of the Bible? Malachi, Daniel, Revelation, or Ezekiel? Revelation. Revelation is the final book of the Bible and contains prophecies about the end times. 76. Which book of the Bible is considered the 5th Gospel? Deuteronomy, Psalms, Malachi, or Isaiah? Isaiah. Because of its multiple prophecies about the Messiah, the book of Isaiah is considered the 5th Gospel. 77. Which book is the only history book in the New Testament? Romans, Acts, Galatians, or James? Acts. The book of Acts records the history of the early church. 78. Which gospel was written specifically for a Gentile audience? Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? Luke. Luke wrote the Theophilus, a Gentile, emphasizing Jesus' message for all people. 79. Which gospel emphasizes Jesus as the Son of God? Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? John. John focuses on Jesus' divine nature, calling him the Word. 80. What book is a collection of love poems? Psalms, Proverbs, Hosea, or Song of Solomon? Song of Solomon is a poetic book about love and marriage. And that's all our questions today, so put your score down below and share this with your friends and family, and we will see you all in the next one.